Hi everyone. In this session, I want to add the XP or experience bar to the player. We have a meaning for killing the enemies. If the player kills an enemy, some amounts of experience would be added to that, and because later we want to add the skill points. So let's begin. Before I continue, I should mention that I moved this project to a laptop so I can work faster on it. However, this is a very weak laptop, so some scenes might lag. Please excuse that. First, let's create a new C# script. For the experience and level system, we first define variables for the player's level and the current experience or XP the player has. We also define how much XP is required as a base value to reach the next level. Each time the player levels up, it should become harder and require more XP, so we also define an XP multiplier. We also need a UI slider to show the XP progress. Next, we write functions for the slider to set its maximum value, set its current value. We also need a text component to display the player's current level. Now let's create a new UI panel. I copy the previous slider and place it here, then adjust its size. I also add a text holder for the level number. You can change the color of the slider if you want. After that, assign the slider and the text reference in the inspector. In the awake function, the slider's max value should be the amount of XP required to reach the next level. The slider's current value should be the player's current XP. The level number should also be displayed in the text. If we run the game right now, nothing happens yet, which is expected. So now we need a function to add experience. Every time a certain amount of XP is added, the current XP increases. If the current XP becomes greater than or equal to the XP required to level up, that means the player reaches a new level. When that happens, the slider should reset, the player levels up. So what do we do in the level up function? We go to the enemy health script and give each enemy a certain amount of XP. Then we call the player XP script from there. When an enemy dies, it sends its XP value to the player by calling the addXP function. Now the slider works, but the level number also needs to be updated. At the same time, XP required for the next level should increases, so leveling up becomes harder each time.
We could make this a float if we want decimal modifiers, but for now we'll keep it as an int and cast the multiplier to an integer. The slider values also need to be updated again. Now everything works. The player levels up correctly. But it's good to give the player a visual feedback when leveling up. For now, let's add an item glow effect. We assign that effect in the inspector. When the player levels up, the effect is instantiated at the player's position. We set its parent to the player, so if the player moves, the effect follows. Nice. Looks good. Now we need to save the level up data. We'll use JSON format for this. First, we create a new class called player save data. Every variable we want to save goes inside this class. Then we reference this class inside a player XP script. We also need a path to store the data on PC or mobile. All variables inside player save data must be public. When accessing them, we must write the class name before the variable name. Now let's create a function to save data. So what does it code do? This line converts the player saved data object into a JSON formatted string. In other words, it takes all the values inside the class and turns them into readable text that can be saved in a file. We also need to use the system.io library. So what does it do? This line creates a file or overwrite if it already exists and writes the JSON string into it. Now we also need a load function. If the file exists, we read the file content. Then we convert the JSON back into data. So what does this do? This line takes the JSON text and converts it back into a player saved data object, restoring all saved values like level and XP. If this is the first time loading the game and no file exists, the game simply uses the default values. We call the load function inside awake. The save function is called in addXP in level up, and also when a player suddenly exits the game. Now, if we go to the same folder on our PC where the inventory data was saved, we'll see that at first no file exists for player XP. But after killing an enemy, a JSON file is created. You can open it with Notepad and you'll see all the stored data here. This is especially useful for games that allow modding. When we load the game again, the UI updates correctly. No, even if we exit and re-enter the game, all data is saved in game and inside a JSON file.